Look closely at the most powerful men in human history. Napoleon Bonaparte, George Washington, Karl Marx, Joseph Stalin, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, even Friedrich Nietzsche. Men who shaped world politics, led bloody revolutions, commanded global empires, and wrote the doctrines that still govern our modern reality. Separated by centuries, divided by opposing ideologies. Some were ruthless tyrants, others were celebrated liberators. Yet, when immortalized in oil paintings and historical photographs, almost every single one of them struck the exact same bizarre, calculated pose, the right hand deliberately concealed beneath the coat. Mainstream historians will tell you it was just an 18th century portrait trend, a sign of polite, gentlemanly restraint. But why did brutal communist dictators in the 1900s strike the exact same pose as French emperors from the 1700s and founding fathers from the 1600s? Were they posing for art? Or were they broadcasting a classified message to the few who know how to see? Welcome back to the Hidden Order. Today, we uncover the ancient code of the hidden hand. Whenever an anomaly appears repeatedly throughout history, the official explanation is always neat, simple, and designed to close the conversation. The standard academic consensus traces the hand in waistcoat pose back to ancient Greece, specifically to the 4th century BC order Aeschines. According to Greek etiquette, speaking with your hands wildly waving outside your toga was considered unrefined, aggressive, and plebeian. A true philosopher kept one hand tucked inside his cloak to signify intellectual discipline, emotional calm, and supreme self-control. Fast forward to the 18th century. In 1737, English writer Francois Nivelin published The Rudiments of Genteel Behavior, an etiquette guidebook for aristocratic society. The book claimed that placing the right hand inside the vest was the quintessential posture of an educated, modest nobleman. On paper, this sounds entirely logical until you test it against reality. Why would Joseph Stalin, a hardened revolutionary who despised Western aristocratic elitism and spent years executing the old nobility, strike the signature pose of an 18th century bourgeois dandy in his official portraits? Why would Karl Marx, the man whose philosophy vowed to destroy traditional class structures, pose with his right hand firmly tucked into his jacket across multiple private and public photographs? And why would military generals on active battlefields, posing for quick field photographs in muddy boots, deliberately stop to slide their hand into their uniform? Etiquette fades. Fashions die within decades. But this gesture did not fade. It expanded across borders, regimes, and centuries. Because it was never about etiquette. It was about allegiance. To understand what this gesture actually communicates, we have to look into the private rituals of the world's most influential fraternity, Freemasonry. In the higher echelons of the craft, specifically within the Royal Arch degree, considered the culmination of the York Rite, initiates undergo a ritual known as the passing of the veils. During the ceremony of the second veil, the candidate is instructed to perform a very specific physical sign, thrusting his right hand into his bosom and pulling it back out. This is known in esoteric texts as the sign of the master of the second veil, or simply the sign of the hidden hand. Biblically, it references the book of Exodus, chapter 4, where God commands Moses, "Put now thine hand into thy bosom." And he put his hand into his bosom. And when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous as snow. Esoterically, however, the symbol carries a much darker and more profound meaning. In occult doctrine, the visible hand represents human action in the material world. But the hidden hand represents action driven by an unseen, higher esoteric directive. It signifies that the individual's public acts, their their laws, their wars, their speeches are not entirely their own, but are guided by the secret doctrines of the unseen brotherhood. When an initiate displays this sign publicly, he is doing two things: silently declaring his rank to fellow brethren across the world, and signaling that his public role is executing the hidden agenda. Once you know the code, the timeline of global history stops looking like a series of random events and begins to look like a synchronized game of chess. Let's examine the key players. George Washington and the Founding Fathers. It is no secret that Washington was an open master mason. When laying the cornerstone of the U.S. Capitol in 1793, he wore full Masonic regalia. In numerous formal portraits, Washington's hand is deliberately positioned inside his waistcoat, a formal testament to the unseen foundation upon which the new republic was constructed. Napoleon Bonaparte Napoleon is practically synonymous with the gesture. While popular myths claimed he simply had stomach ulcers or an itchy skin condition, historical records show that Napoleon's four brothers, Joseph, Lucien, Louis, and Jerome, were all high-ranking grandmasters in French Freemasonry. Napoleon used Masonic infrastructure to consolidate his vast European empire, repeatedly posing with the signature gesture at key turning points of his reign. The revolutionary contradiction, Karl Marx and Joseph Stalin Karl Marx, was heavily connected to underground continental societies like the League of the just before drafting the Communist Manifesto. In his most famous photographic portraits, Marx stares straight into the lens with his hand deeply concealed. Decades later, Stalin mirrored the exact same posture in official Soviet imagery. Think about the sheer scale of this contradiction. On the surface, capitalism, constitutional republicanism, imperial monarchy, and totalitarian communism are mortal enemies. Yet the figureheads who led all four systems shared the exact same esoteric calling card. As clothing styles evolved in the late 20th and 21st centuries, waistcoats vanished from everyday life. But does a centuries-old symbolic language simply vanish when clothing changes? Or does the symbolism adapt to modern media? Notice how modern leaders, entertainment moguls, and media figures still frequently pose with subtle variations. Hands slipping inside suit jackets during photo calls, distinctive triangular hand postures, or the infamous one-eye framing across high-fashion magazine covers. Symbols are the universal language of power. As the ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus famously stated, "The Lord whose oracle is at Delphi neither speaks nor conceals, but gives a sign." Perhaps the most chilling example isn't a politician or a warlord, but a musical prodigy, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. In his most famous 1777 portrait, long before the French Revolution or modern geopolitics, a young Mozart stares into the canvas with his right hand strictly concealed. Mozart was an open and dedicated member of the Vienna Masonic Lodge, Zur Wohltätigkeit. In fact, his final masterpiece, The Magic Flute, is recognized by music historians worldwide as a direct, note-for-note initiation ritual encoded into an opera. The overture itself opens with three distinct, heavy chords, representing the three knocks at the temple door required for an initiate to enter. Mozart used sound to hide the doctrine. His portraits used the gesture to seal it. Even in the realm of art and harmony, the unseen hand was orchestrating the composition behind the curtain. When you look at history, you can choose to believe that dozens of world leaders across 3 centuries spontaneously shared an obsessive habit of putting their right hand inside their clothes. Or you can look at the documented rituals of the societies they belong to and realize that nothing at the highest levels of power is ever a coincidence. What do you think? Was the hidden hand merely an archaic fashion trend, or the undeniable footprint of an unseen network guiding world events from the shadows? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to uncover more symbols that the world was never meant to decipher, hit that subscribe button and turn on all notifications. Until next time, stay vigilant.